Okay, welcome to chapters 5 and 6 in supervision. We're going to be looking at identifying the decision-making and problem-solving skills that are needed by managers. We're going to look at some of the methods of decision-making, although your author doesn't cover all of them. And sometimes decisions require discipline or corrections. And when you have to do that, it's wise to do it in a positive manner. So we're going to look at some positive discipline methods. We'll also consider the method of progressive discipline and fairness. So let's start with Chapter 5, Decision-Making and Problem-Solving. First of all, decision-making is defining problems and choosing a course of action from among any alternatives that you have. And hopefully you have more than just one or two. It also helps supervisors find solutions for the problems that they have that might result from changing situations or even some unusual circumstances. So the relationship of problems decision-making is that a problem exists whenever the objectives are not being met. Problem solving is a process of taking corrective action to try to meet those objectives. And therefore, decision-making is a process of selecting an alternative course of action that will hopefully solve a problem. It's not just flipping a coin. It's not just rolling the dice going yes, no. It is a process. And as we talked once before, keep in mind that managers do 4 primary functions. They plan, they organize, they lead, and they control. Okay? All right, so the first decision is to decide whether or not we need to take corrective action. Sometimes it's something that's not really important. It's one of those little small things that hardly ever happen, and it's not a big deal, so why even go into the process of taking corrective action? But keep in mind that managers get paid to do 2 primary things: make efficient decisions and solve problems. That's what you're getting paid to be a manager for. So to make a good decision, you first have to know what it is you're trying to accomplish. Typically, there are 2 kinds of decisions. There are program decisions, which are solutions to repetitive and routine problems provided by policies, procedures, or rules, or methods of doing something. For instance, like starting your car. Your car only starts a certain way. If you have one of these new keyless cars like we do, you have to put your foot on the brake before you can push the button to start the car. That's programmed routine. Then there's non-programmed decisions. Our solutions are unique problems that require judgment, intuition, and sometimes creativity. For instance, maybe you're trying to decide on what color to paint your house or what color to paint the car. So the decision-making process is basically a systematic, step-by-step process to aid in choosing the correct solution or best alternative. So step 1, you have to define the problem. And then 2, you analyze the problem, gathering facts and information, getting data. And then step 3 is establish some kind of decision criteria. And then once you've got it all isolated and figured out, you start to develop alternatives. First, you think of all the things that you could do. Don't try to evaluate them yet. Once you get them developed, then you evaluate and try to choose what might be the best alternative to solve the problem. And then it doesn't end there. You've got to follow up, appraise the results, and constantly tweak or make changes. So the whole decision-making process differs really upon the nature of the situation. If you know the facts, you should follow the method defined previously. However, sometimes you have to find the cause of the problem, known as determining the root cause. A common tool used to help solve problems today and find that root cause is a diagram called the Fishbone Diagram, or we like to, in this country, call it the cause and effect diagram. But it looks like a fishbone when you lay it all out. The most common bones used are the man, machine, method, material, measurement, and environment. Now, if you look at the one the author gives you in the book, they only list 4. Well, that's not sufficient. There's usually more things that could go into solving a problem, and so therefore you really need to consider all of them. So again, the 6 that are commonly used for real in industry, not by something in a textbook, is man, machine, method, material, measurement, and environment. And you look to these categories or these main bones and you brainstorm what in those elements might be causing the problem and in what way they could be contributing and what you might do if you define one of those steps, what you might do to solve it. So there are a variety of methods used today to attempt to problem solve. The author only lists a couple, but the 5 primary methods are brainstorming, which is the most popular, synetics, then there's nominal grouping, there's consensus mapping, and there's the Delphi technique. So if you really want to find out all the type of problem solving or decision making methods there are for creativity, I recommend you look into these methods as well. Don't be satisfied with just the couple the author gives you. The most popular method above all is brainstorming. It's a free flow of ideas in a group. Everybody just throws out random ideas. You record them, you write them down. No idea is stupid. No idea should be laughed at because sometimes a thought from one person can trigger an idea in another. So the whole object is aimed at developing alternative solutions or causes to your problem. So when you are doing brainstorming, you have to defer all judgment of ideas. There is no dumb idea, so you have to consider all of them, write them all down, put them on Post-it notes, poster board, whatever. Look for as many ideas as possible. Encourage those to freewheel and free form, throw ideas out there. And again, when those words or thoughts come out, sometimes it causes a secondary idea or creativity to which you can hitchhike on. Then there's also the nominal group technique. This is a type of brainstorming decision-making process to where individuals first identify alternative solutions privately. They may sit down and they all list them all out. And then collectively, they bring it in, share, evaluate, and everyone decides as a group which is the most logical cause or solution. There are ethical considerations to everything you do, and you have to look at these when you're making a decision and give the ethical test to it. The test being a consideration or guideline to be addressed in developing and evaluating those ethical aspects of some alternatives that you might choose. Is it legal? Is there a compliance test? Is it a public knowledge test? Is there long-term consequences, not just solving it for the moment? What's going to happen after you make that decision? There should be the examine your motives test. It should be an inner voice test. That's that kind of your conscience telling you, I don't think this is a good idea. And then there should be the fairness test. So the rule of thumb is, if you as a manager or supervisor believe a choice or alternative might be questionable or could be unacceptable within the company's ethical policies, then you should consult your managers, human resources, or some other staff specialists who might be able to provide you with some knowledge and guidance in which way to proceed. A couple other ways that alternatives get chosen, not always the best way. One is optimizing, and that is selecting the best alternative. For example, finding the filling station selling the cheapest gas. So when you're going down the road, you're price watching, I know I do, and I may go a little further because I'm thinking that I'm going to get it cheaper somewhere else. The other way is satisficing, and that's selecting the alternative that meets your minimal decision criteria. Just stopping and buying gas at the first gas station you come to before you run out of gas on the highway. So to properly make the right decision, it's always good to reflect back on what you know or what you've experienced. What worked before? Have I used that decision before? So what actually happened as a result of that decision? What feedback did I receive about the success of that decision? What style did I use? What didn't work? Why didn't it work? What caused the differences between the intended outcome and what actually happened? What kind of feedback did you receive after a failed decision? And again, we're all going to make bad decisions. It's going to happen. The thing is to learn from it and move on. And then what decision-making style did you use when you made that faulty or failed decision? So it's kind of good to know what kind of decision maker you are. Are you a reflective kind where you sit back and think about it, or are you reflexive where you shoot from the hip? So there are 4 different types of personalities, and I hope someday you get a chance to learn about it. because it's fascinating to learn about personality types. Helps you understand people that you know, relatives, but more importantly, the people you work for and the people you work with. So you're either an analytical, a driver, an expressive, or an amiable type decision maker. Okay. All right. So finally, don't always be hasty. Ensure that you have all the facts, or have you researched all the possible causes and solutions. Most problems don't necessarily have to have an immediate answer. And if you jump too quick, sometimes you're not going to make the right decision. So if you can, weigh it out, gather more information, apply a participative supervision approach, get other people's input and thoughts. And you have to look at it, how extensive is the problem? Does it need an immediate response, or can it wait till tomorrow or the next day? Who else might be affected by it? Get them involved. Ask employees, what do they know? And have they thought through it? What kind of ideas do they have? And what do they recommend that might help solve the problem? A lot of times your employees will bring you ideas that you could usefully use to solve a situation. All right, now we're going to flip the coin a little bit. We're going to look at discipline, how you discipline and groom your work staff. Discipline is a state of orderliness, the degree to which employees act according to the standards you set down and say, this is how you're to behave here at work. Again, I think I might have said this to you once before. We can all find negative in anyone and in any situation. The thing to do is look for the positive in people. And so if someone does something wrong, don't look at it as, oh, they did that on purpose. Look at it as it was probably a mistake, a bad judgment call. Turn it into a positive situation. Positive discipline is the condition that exists when employees generally follow the organization's rules and try to meet their standards or expectations. You want good morale in your company, keep everything on a positive note. Morale is that set of feelings and attitudes that individuals and workers have towards the job and the work environment, and we want to keep that on the upswing. So you need to have positive self-discipline. Employees regulating their behavior out of self-interest and their normal desire to meet reasonable standards. But remember, you set the example. If you're sitting around reading the newspaper instead of working, and you turn around and look and see the rest of your employees sitting around reading the newspaper, well, what do you expect, right? So there always is in every company, and there has to be some ethical codes and policies. And these are pretty much statements of standards, of things that we subscribe to. And so it's an outline in broad, value-oriented terms about the norms and ideals that are professed throughout the organization. They don't ensure there's ethical conduct, but they're guidelines in hopes that we all do follow them. Okay? So you want to foster ethical behavior. You want to develop these codes and policies and get the input from your employees and supervisors. See what they say about it. If you have an unreasonable ethical code, maybe you need to discuss it with your work staff. Maybe you're thinking one way, but in reality it's being taken another way. Establish a hotline. Establish an ethic reporting system. Appoint somebody as the chairperson or ombudsman. And protect whistleblowers. Now, a lot of times, somebody will blow the whistle and then they wind up losing their job, like the cartoon I'm showing here. I love this. You did the right thing, but naturally we have to fire you. Well, unfortunately, that happens too often, and that's why people don't speak up. Need to have rules of conduct. Inform your employees which standards of behavior are acceptable and what ones are accepted and which ones are not unacceptable. Sometimes they should be included in the employee handbooks, and if not, if there's some that are missing, then you need to update your employee handbook. Meanwhile, post a memorandum until you get that print update. The rules of conduct should help you as a supervisor encourage positive morals, and encourage employee self-discipline. Sometimes they are subject to review, and sometimes they need to be changed because it might be interpreted wrong or it could be a legal infraction. Example in your book shows you company rules and regulations. Things like horseplay, malicious mischief, or conduct affecting the rights of others will not be tolerated. Some of them are common sense, but again, These days you have to wonder what is common sense. All right, so when you have a disciplinary situation, you should have a prescribed, established procedure for confronting it. So, any infractions of rules regarding time schedules, rest periods, procedures, safety, and so on, they should be confronted. You can't have people coming in late all the time or frequently absent. You can't have defective or inadequate work performance. People with poor attitudes might influence the work of others or damage the image of the company. So you as a supervisor or manager have to be prompt, firm, but impartial. They have to be fair to everybody and apply to everybody equally. That's very important. There is what's called just cause. Just cause is that concept that sets a standard for disciplinary action requiring a test of fairness and elements of normal due process requiring investigation, proper and sufficient evidence, and a penalty that is commensurate with the nature of the infraction. So you don't want to have a severe penalty if it's just a minor thing. They were 5 minutes late, you're fired. That's a little extreme, right? Whenever you have a disciplinary process or a problem, you should investigate it. Make sure you have all of the facts. Are they available? If not, get them. Are they reported accurately? How serious is the offense? If it's only minor, don't make a big thing out of it. But if it's major or intolerable, you have to do that investigation. But you also have to back up a little bit and wonder, did the employee know the rule or standard? Did we properly inform them? Then you look at the employee. What's their disciplinary record? How long have they been with you? What's been their performance level? If they've been with you a number of years and this is a minor infraction, it should... And again, should the employee receive the same treatment others have had for the same offense? In other words, if you have a rule, it has to apply to everybody. Sorry, I had a phone call in the middle. I'm not sure where I left off. The point is, be fair with everyone, and the rules apply to everybody, regardless of who they are. Okay? So you want to conduct confidential interview in private, not out in public on the floor in front of all the other employees, and you want to do so in a non-threatening manner. You don't want to intimidate the person or make them feel uncomfortable. You need to allow the employee to have a witness present during the interview, and I'm going to suggest, if it's somebody of the opposite sex, make sure you have someone available with you. Do not take someone from the opposite sex into a closed room, close the door, because you're opening yourself up for a problem. Ask both directive and non-directive questions so that you're trying to get specific answers about what happened and why. Don't ask closed-ended questions where they can just answer yes or no. Make sure you ask open-ended questions. Don't have any precognitions or make final judgments ahead of it until you have all the information. In other words, keep an open mind and do not make judgments or presuppose you understand what's going on. During this process, you've got to maintain self-control. Don't lose your temper. Be polite, calm, and fair. Conducted in a process that respects that person's privacy, respects them as an individual. Even if they've done something wrong, they still deserve to be treated properly. And the time element, very important. Minor disciplinary offenses are not counted against the employee over a period of time. So if it's like this is no big deal, if we don't have this conversation again, given that you're giving them a verbal warning, we don't have this conversation again the next month or two, we'll forget it. It's not been a problem. Serious offenses need to be documented. They're going to require immediate action, and you need to document them. Progressive discipline is a system of disciplinary action that increases the severity of the penalty with each offense. So, for instance, if they come in late, you have a nice informal discussion. Everybody's late once in a while. If they do it again, you give them an oral warning, including counseling. They do it again, it's a written warning. The next time it might be a written warning with a layoff or suspension. And then maybe you transfer to demote them. And if the pattern continues, then obviously they're subject for termination and discharge. Having an informal discussion is the best way to start it off. Determine the reasons for their conduct. Ask them why. And reaffirm their responsibility for the action they took, the behavior. You can record on the side without handing them a written warning, but you can record the date, the place, and time of discussion and what took place. And I recommend that you do so and put it in their employee record. So with the oral warning, you want to impress on the employee that they need to change that behavior, and you warn them that if it continues, you have to follow the next steps. And again, notate it in their record. Okay? All right. Now, a disciplinary action program often begins with an informal talk. And as offenses are repeated, then the penalties become more severe. So you don't necessarily need to write somebody up the first time. But the next time, I think it's necessary. And the third time, you need to go the next route. Maybe a written warning and a day off without pay. And then if the infraction doesn't clear up, it's time to get rid of them. But I'm going to tell you, even though your author says in the book, supervisors should record the information, I'm going to say you must, because it establishes a pattern. It's documented proof that these things happened and it took place. And if it leads to termination, it's kind of like a lawyer. You better have your case ready. Okay? Early stages written warnings is a formal document that becomes part of the employee's permanent record. And again, you have to reemphasize that the employee needs to change their behavior. Otherwise, there's going to be more serious action taken. And when you give them a written one, you need to have the employee sign the written warning. And if they go, I'm not going to sign it, then tell them, all right, well, sign it saying that you refuse to sign it or you disagree, and date it. That's all I'm asking. You don't have to agree with it, but at least you acknowledge that you have seen this. For advanced stages, you may have to go to suspensions or layoffs. This is going to involve a loss of pay and usually extends from 1 to several days or maybe weeks. Typically, it usually has to be approved by higher level management or HR department. If it's a personality problem between you and the employee, maybe you have the employee transferred. A transfer is taken when an employee is experiencing difficulty either with you or a supervisor under you or with people in the department that he or she is working with. And then, of course, another step is demotion, downgrading an employee to a lower paying job. But this one should only be used in unusual situations because usually once you demote somebody, their attitude goes out the window. They feel defeated. They just aren't productive anymore. So sometimes discharge is a better alternative. If you have to discharge or terminate somebody, never use the word fire. Never use the word fire. Write that down. The discharge is probably the most drastic form of action you have to take, and it's usually as a last resort or for serious offenses. Yes, it involves loss and waste because now you have to train a replacement. It disrupts the makeup and morale of the group because some people might have been friends with them and they don't understand the whole situation, so they're going to feel it was unfair. If you have a union there, it might result in a grievance and arbitration proceedings. It might involve meeting standards for non-discrimination. You have to be very careful. And again, if you document all this stuff, showing your trail along the way, this whole process becomes a lot easier. Okay? There is what's called the employment at will clause. Most states have it. Most companies abide by it and state so in their hiring process. It's a legal concept that employers can dismiss employees at any time for any reason except unlawful discrimination, contractual or other kind of restrictions. It allows employees to also terminate their relationship at any time for any reason. So it's kind of a two-way street. Unfortunately, most companies forget that it works for the employee as well. It is, however, subject to state and federal court exemptions that restrict the application. So some states may not allow that. Make sure you know your local laws. Does not mean that a discharge action should have a rational basis. It could be they just wanted to leave, moving, or for you it could be for just or good cause. Maybe you have to lay them off because there's no available work, and that's not necessarily a mark against them. So in your book, you will see a sample of an employment at will policy from Citizens Bank. Okay. Now, giving advance warning. Employees need to know in advance what the rules and regulations are. They need to be clearly informed that if they do this or do that, it's going to lead to disciplinary action. Employees need to be required to sign documents saying they've received, read, and understand the company handbook and the policies of the company, and that they're going to comply by them. Previously unenforced rules can be reinstated once prior notice and warnings are given. Okay, now, immediacy. Disciplinary action be taken as promptly as possible after the offense. Don't let it drag out a week or two. The sooner you take care of it, the better. Immediate discipline is required for serious offenses. You may have to temporarily suspend somebody on the spot. You are suspended until we conclude our investigation. Please go home. So sometimes if it's a severe instance, you may have to let them go right then. But you don't terminate on them. You suspend it until you have your documents together. Consistency. Appropriate disciplinary action should be taken each time that infraction occurs. Not with the ones you don't like, and you don't with the ones you do like. Inconsistent discipline leads to anxiety, bad morale problems. Employees have doubts on what they can and can't do, how legitimate you are. They question your integrity. So you really got to be consistent. Consistency, though, does not necessarily mean treating everyone in the same manner in all situations. Employees must feel that any other employee in the same situation would receive the similar or same treatment. All employees who commit to the same or similar offense should be treated the same way. Penalties should be connected with the offense, not with the person. So it's the object, not the personality. Okay? And making a disciplinary action impersonal reduces the resentment felt by any employees. I remember terminating an employee once who actually thanked me for it in the way that I did it because they knew they did wrong and they knew they had to be terminated, and I did it in a proper way. Don't hear that very often. It's amazing when you do hear it. The no-fault attendance policy is a policy under which unscheduled absences and tardiness are counted as occurrences, and their accumulation is used in progressive discipline. It's often preferred by supervisors because they do not have to assess and determine the legitimacy of an employee's unscheduled absence. Again, keep good records, keep documentation. You may have to go to a meeting over it. The employee does have the right to appeal. Procedures by which an employee can request higher level management to review your disciplinary action, or if they file for unemployment, they're going to be going to the Unemployment Bureau, and that documentation may need to be brought forth to verify what you did was correct and there was a pattern. But you can do a lot of things without punishment. We're going to go back to my statement of look for the good in everyone. Use coaching and counseling as preliminary steps. And try to keep things on a positive note. Paid decision-making leave that allows employees to decide whether they want to stay or improve or to quit. The optimal reaction to discipline is an acceptance of responsibility. They admit that they know they were wrong and they're going to change their behavior. If an employee commits to improving but fails to do so, make sure you have it documented, but then, yes, of course, you can terminate them. You're going to hear it's not fair. Standards shared by most employees for how one should act and be treated in the organization may not agree with you and your company's policy. So having impartial, appropriate actions free of favoritism and bias is important. Doing the documentation is important. And it all depends on the interaction you have with your supervisor and they with you, and the procedures to arrive at the action taken and what the outcomes are. People react to unfair treatment in one of three ways. They either fight it, they flee and flight, or they get better and go with the flow. Okay? So, if you have any questions, that's the end of Chapter 5 and 6. Don't forget to do the quiz. I think you have an individual assignment this right if I remember, Any questions, you know the email, contact me. Have a great week. By the way, you will find everything that you need in the weekly assignment folder. So, again, have a good day.